Well, thanks for tuning in to Local 3's podcast, Breaking Ground, where we discuss all things labor, labor history, politics, organizing, and union benefits as it relates to Operating Engineers Local 3, which is the largest construction trades local in the United States, if not North America. So today, well, it's all about cranes. Tower cranes, crawler cranes, and the members who operate them, as well as the Local 3 representatives who represent that very special workforce within our union. I have with me today two Local 3 staff members who have been and are heavily involved in the crane industry. I have Local 3 District Rep Jimmy Jacobs from Fairfield. Jimmy, hello.
Good morning.
And I have Tom Kohlenberg with us, who is the special rep in charge of cranes and dredging, also from Fairfield. So these guys live, eat, and breathe, or have lived, eaten, and breathed the crane world. And they're going to provide some insight into that unique universe. So Jimmy, let's start with you first. Tell me a little bit about how cranes have impacted your life, kind of where you got started in the field in Local 3 and what you currently do for their membership.
Well, I am the district rep in Fairfield currently. I was and started out my life as a staff member of Local 3 as the crane rep. When Russ Burns was elected business manager, Mark Burton moved into the Fairfield district office, and I was asked to take over the crane rep duties. And I didn't think I would ever give that up because I loved that job. But as retirements and positions open, there became an opportunity for me to become the district rep. Tom became the crane rep. He was on staff here as a business agent in Sacramento. But going backwards, I started out life as a truck driver at a company called Peninsula Crane and Rigging in San Jose, California. The owner of that company, Art Alger, gave me an opportunity to get into the apprenticeship program. It's kind of a funny story. I rolled into the yard one day with boom and counterweight from a rig, and he was standing at the scales looking at me. So I pulled in to fuel the truck up, and he said, "Jimmy, can you afford to have some time off?" And I went, "Oh, I must have done something really bad today."
You thought you were being fired.
Guess my career is over, and it was a short one because I hadn't been there that long. And he said, "You're not going to be a truck driver for Art Alger Trucking. You're going to be a crane operator for Peninsula Crane." And I said, I don't know that I want to really do that. And Art had this big booming voice, and he looked at me and he said, "Do you want to be a truck driver your whole life?" And I said, "Well, I hadn't really thought about my whole life, Art." And he said, "Well, I am."
What were you, like in your 20s at that time?
I was 22. Yeah. And he said, "I am. I am thinking about your life, and you're going to school. You're going to be a crane operator."
Now, had you had any interest in cranes at that time?
Only hauling pieces and parts of them and doing all that. But Art saw something in me, and I will be forever grateful for that. And he sent me off to the Operating Engineers Training Center, and the rest is history. I served my entire apprenticeship in the first 5 years of my journeyman life at PCR. It was a great time.
Well, Tom, I'm going to ask you the same question. How did you get into Local 3 when you were in the field, and then how did you make the decision to join the staff and then become the crane and dredging rep?
I started my career, I got out of the military in 1991. I was a combat medic in the military. Tried to be that. I found out that I have no bedside manner. No. So I went into
Still doesn't.
So I went into construction. My sister worked at the Naval Weapons Station in Concord. So I got an opportunity to go there, and I wound up starting out as a blocker and bracer, blocking explosives on ships, rail cars. Then went into ships, derricks, and started training on most of the cranes that they had over there, and again, loading explosives all the time. They went to go shut down in probably about 2000, and I went out non-union a little while for a company, Aero Sign Company out of Oakland.
Operating cranes?
Operating cranes.
So your experience with cranes, was that when you started operating them, or you had?
No, I started operating them at the Naval Weapons Station. I spent like 6 years there. 6 or 7 years I was at Naval Weapons Station, and was working on a parking garage over in Walnut Creek And Mark Burton showed up one day, talked to me, asked me about being interested in the union, and said I didn't really think about it. And he came back the next day, and I was still there, and he says, well, I've got a job for you tomorrow if you want to do it. And called the wife and wound up giving a week's notice, and I joined the union.
And after you joined, were you immediately like, boy, this is the right choice?
It was the right choice.
And how come you had that opinion? Like, what was it about it that?
Better pay, better wages. I had backing. I had somebody, not just myself, to help fight issues, and
You had work.
I had work. It was better for my family. Matter of fact, if it wasn't for the union, I believe my wife probably wouldn't be here.
You mean because of the benefits? Yeah, okay.
Getting on staff, I think it kind of started with when Jimmy got into his position in 2006, 2007. And I used to talk to Jimmy every morning. And there was me and one other operator that would fight to see who could talk to him in the morning. And that, honestly, almost every morning, Monday through Friday, I was talking to Jimmy for half hour, 45 minutes.
About what?
Anything and everything about the agreement.
Tom was one of our stewards, and then a little later on, he became a foreman.
So you knew that agreement inside and out, and you were what, making sure that everything was good to go?
Yeah, and I'd go into different companies, and if there was an issue, and it was against our agreement, I had no problem standing up and fighting for it. And if I was iffy about a question or anything of the agreement, I always went over it with Jimmy, and Jimmy is either offered to, take it on himself or let me do it. And 9 times out of 10, I would do it until I couldn't.
Flashbang.
Yeah. And, ultimately, he was, steward on 2 projects, foreman on a project. Jimmy was always my rep. And it was kind of like, I think in 2010, 11 is when I started looking at getting on staff. And my wife kind of pushed me towards it. I feel like he was training me already for it. And I wound up getting, I think 2014 is when I got on the staff, and I still do the same thing he does.
He was a foreman on $1 billion project. It was a huge job.
Which project was that?
It was a floor project in Chevron. Mm-hmm. That was the one we had for about 9 months. And then it just all went like, I think there was 1,000 people that got laid off in one day.
Wow.
Shut that whole project down.
Little permit issue.
Yeah.
But it came back.
Well, I think it's fascinating that you worked together for so long, and that you were able to kind of let go a little bit and move into a different role as a district rep.
I am a firm believer in if you're needed somewhere, and I felt that I needed to sacrifice that crane rental rep position for the betterment of the local. It was it put some other people in some other places that they need to be, and it was a good move.
To our listeners who may not know anything about Local 3 at all, cranes in general are exciting. They're kind of the big players on a job site. What can we say about them? It's one of the most heavily sought after positions within the union. Also comes with great responsibility, where most jobs are waiting either on the crane to make the pick or the crane to arrive. What makes a good crane operator?
Patience and cool. You got to be cool. If you're excited all the time, it's a problem.
Now, I heard that they call you Tom Thumper.
You really went there.
You're right.
Yes, she did.
Well, you said cool, and so I'm just imagining.
Stay in the script. Stay in the script.
Can you explain this idea of being cool?
No. This is my story. I'll tell this one. I will tell it. And I work for Bragg. And the guy might get mad at me or not, but Gary Heel was my oiler. We were working over at the power plant, the old power plant, pulling some stop blocks out over in Antioch, right by the Antioch bridge. And they were about 30-footers, and we were having a hard time, had an old 90-ton Grove, having a hard time popping them out, but we finally get them out. And, usually you take them out and lay them towards you. This time we were setting them and trying to take them out. Well, crane was a little iffy there. And when I get nervous, my right leg starts to just bounce.
It's bouncing right now.
Yeah. And then in that crane, of course, the throttle's on the right side, and Gary's trying to tell me to boom down, and the crane's getting a little lighter, and my foot keeps just bouncing, and then it's on the throttle, and it's womp, 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 womp. Gary comes over to the door and opens it up and goes, "What's going on?" And okay, and then shuts the door. Okay, just put it down right there.
He's just doing his thing.
Just did his thing. But yeah, hey, we've all gotten into nervous spots, and we all have our nervous twitches.
Well, that was my next question. Obviously, you have personally both been involved in situations that were kind of sketchy or scary or a big pick or a big job site. I want to hear a little bit about that.
You won't, I do want to say, you won't ever forget those feelings when a crane goes lighter. You always know what they're there.
It was a
I would be
different,
terrified.
it was a different world. When even as a short period of time ago as Tom's story about when he got named Thumper, which things stick. It's crane rentals, a small world. It was a different world. Today's world is very different than it was 10 years ago. The crane industry has drastically changed. But what hasn't changed is I thoroughly believe that everybody that operates cranes is a little bit of an adrenaline junkie.
You'd have to be.
You know, and when you've got 100 tons on the hook and you're going up 300 feet with it, it can be a little intimidating and
Sure.
and nerve-wracking. I thrive on it. I love it. I mean, it's to me, it's the coolest thing ever. But everybody reacts differently. I used to turn my hat around backwards. Tom had his little thumper thing going on, which we all tease him about, but we are all adrenaline junkies, and when you're pushing a machine to 100% of its capacity, it can get pretty dicey at times, and you're relying on the ground, you're relying on the machine, you're relying on a lot of pieces and parts to all work together
Pieces and parts and people that have done the right thing to set the crane up.
to make it home.
Yeah.
But it's fun. Every minute of it's fun.
Well, and that's being the responsibility of operating that particular piece of equipment is pretty high risk.
It is. When I say it's changed, the equipment is so drastically changed. When I first got in the union and got into the apprenticeship program and was working, we moved conventional truck cranes. And when I say conventional truck cranes, I mean truly conventional truck cranes, friction machines, to do air conditioner jobs. It was not uncommon for us to take a 140-ton link belt, a 238 friction crane, a truck crane, and move it from an iron job at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a Friday to an electronics building so we could go to work at 5 o'clock on Saturday morning setting AC units, and then we'd pull it apart and we'd move it back to that iron job. So it was ready to go to work at 7 a.m. on Monday morning. It was the constant moving of machines. Today's world, they have these European hydros, these AT cranes as we call them. They're monsters. They want to throw themselves over backwards. They run so much counterweight on them. Rearward stability is a huge thing in today's world, but it's different. The cranes are different. The jobs are still the same, but the cranes are very different just because of the...
Do you mean better, safer, easier to maneuver?
They are better, they are safer, and they are
Stronger.
definitely easier to maneuver. You know, when you roll up with a crane, you're the big dog on the job. That's kind of changed a little bit. And it's very unfortunate in my mind. I don't like that change. I think it needs to go backwards a little bit.
Why has it changed that that's no longer the case?
Before, when you rolled in with that 238 or that 278, we did a lot of stuff with truck cranes, conventional truck cranes. And the 8460s, Bragg ran around with them. Great machines. Without sounding like a weirdo, they're man's cranes. It took a crew to put them together. You boomed them up, you walked them with the boom in the air. You had to set them up. You had to demand a job site that would support that.
I see.
You're putting this machine on rubber to move it from point A to point B and get to where you need to be to make a pick. Nowadays, You can vacuum the boom in, take a
just
couple
like
of the counterweights off,
Yeah.
put them over the front, zoom around to another spot. The job site requirements are different. And personally, my opinion, the general contractors have gotten a bit stubborn. They've been spoiled by these giant hydros.
So they're just like, I'm only going to take that one and bring it in this
Right.
way in one day.
I
And
think dollar signs. Every time they look out the window and see that crane, all they see is money. And they want it gone as fast as possible. That before we would say, hey, you know what, dude, we're gonna put the crane together and we're gonna park it over in the corner of the job.
it's ready to go.
And when you get some equipment in here to make us access, we'll come back and do the job for you.
So we've gone soft.
We've gone soft. We have. I hate to say it, but we have. And the large hydros have allowed that. They're pretty cool machines, but as far as the demands of a job site, you still have to have the ground stability. You still have to have the conditions to get the job the crane on the job, but you don't need 350 feet of real estate to lay your boom on the ground and pick it up. You don't have to walk the machines with the boom in the air unless you have a leffing jib attachment on one, at which point you got to have some pretty good ground conditions because those big hydros don't like to walk with the leffers on them. So you got to have good conditions to do that, but I don't feel that the crane rental industry holds the general contractors as accountable today as we used to yesterday.
Well, I was going to bring that up. I mean, the cranes never just magically appear put together on a job site. I know when I first started working here, it's like, oh, they're putting a crane up, and that's like could be a whole day experience. Like how it used to be is what you're talking about. It used to take like how many people to do that, and then there was all the work ahead of time of being able to get it in sometimes some very precarious situations, right?
And Tom knows this being at Bragg, we used to race. So Bragg Crane put an 8460 up in 2.5 hours, which means Peninsula Crane's gonna do it in 2 hours and 20 minutes.
Right.
Which means Biggie Crane's gonna do it in 2 hours and 15 minutes. We were always racing.
Who could get the crane up the fastest?
Yeah, rigging in and rigging out, man. We're gonna blow this thing out. And every day was a race to do it a little bit faster. If the job site permitted, me and my operator, or if I was the operator, me and my oiler, we'd try to beat our time yesterday. Always. It was always a race. It was rental.
Obviously, not everybody can be a crane operator. You had mentioned patience, being able to perform under pressure, perhaps the ability to sort of like the adrenaline rush of all of this responsibility. But women can be crane operators too, and I know that we've had one. Kat Lytle, who's the director of apprenticeship at the OE3 JATC, she was a crane operator. Do you recall working with her or any other female crane operators out there?
I met her at a time in her life that probably wasn't the greatest, and we got her working. We opened a door for her, and she ran through it and excelled everywhere she went, including being on staff today. So I'm pretty proud of her, but she is a good operator. I worked with Sherry Murphy. Sherry came from foundation pile driving. Her and her husband, Randy Murphy, were operator oiler team. I was at the Consumines River power plant at the time, and it's the first non-crane rental job I had ever had. And Randy came out there with Sherry and drove all the piles, and I knew that I wanted Randy on the job. I wanted Randy, but Randy wouldn't leave foundation, so I got Sherry.
Oh, and then he left.
And then he left and came. And Sherry became an operator. And she always had the capabilities, but she became an operator on that power plant. She went from oiling to operating, and she did a phenomenal job. The Boilermakers loved her. And that was the first woman in the field that I had ever worked with was Sherry Murphy. Sherry and Randy are both retired and hopefully living the good life out there in retirement land today. But she was the first one, and the whole job site was in support of her. We all loved her, and we all watched her grow as an operator on that job. It was a long job. She was out there for 9-10 months, so we got to see a lot from her. It was really fun.
Tom, do you have any memories or stories about female crane operators?
Currently, we do have actually 2 tower crane operators that work for Biggie. And we actually have a woman-owned company that's a crane operator that Harris Hoist out of San Francisco. She's moved up and started her own company.
There's been a few of them come through the apprenticeship
Becky.
program, and they're doing well.
Yeah,
Becky Hinsey,
yeah.
worked with her a lot.
Photographed her a few times.
Yeah, she was great to work with, oiler operator. I did work with her in the refineries. She was, yeah, don't tick her off. She's very good with a hard hat. She can throw it and hit you real good. So,
I hate to start naming them because I'll miss one and they'll be mad at me, but
Okay, yeah, they're
through
out
the
there.
through the apprenticeship program, we've grown a few, and it's not. There's nothing says it's a man's world. It doesn't have to be the only thing that, and I always tell every one of them, the thing I can't identify with is I don't know what it's like to be a woman in the construction field. So there's a support group out there for them, but it's different.
It's not easy.
It's not easy.
Still not easy. So you guys mentioned crane rental a lot. Can you explain the difference between a crane operator in crane rental and a crane operator who works for a signatory company, say like Kiewit?
Crane rental is exactly that. It's crane rental. The crane rental companies aren't general contractors. They rent cranes to general contractors or anybody that needs a crane.
And it's just the crane.
Just the crane.
And who are those companies that are involved in crane rental?
There's several of them in Northern California. We've got some great employers. Bragg, Biggie, Peninsula Crane and Rigging, Maxim are the big ones. Sheedy in San Francisco. Sheedy's been a contractor longer than Local 3's been a union, which is cool history. Actually, Biggie has too, I believe. They both are over 100 years old. Bragg Crane is owned by the Bragg family still today. There's several smaller companies out there, Hatton's, West Coast, Silicon Valley, which is a division of Biggie, Titan Crane, American Crane, Summit Crane. They all do the same thing. They rent cranes and people by the hour.
And the difference for, say, Kiewit is they have a whole fleet of equipment and they have some cranes.
Yes.
And those people stay with the job.
Say the dam up in Oroville was a real high profile one. Kiewit was contracted to do that dam. They brought their own cranes up there. They didn't use crane rental. They have their own operators that run their cranes on their projects. Whereas if they needed a rental crane, they would have called one of the signatory rental companies to come up there for a specific portion, a day, 2 days, a week.
So that's the difference when you say if you're renting out a crane, it's for a very specific, specialized, fairly quick purpose, whereas the other cranes with the other signatories are there for the duration.
Yeah, and crane rental does do long-term projects, but it's not the norm. The norm is quick in and out projects. The crane's only going to be there a short period of time.
I in my personal opinion on crane rental is it's not for everybody. You either hate it or you love it. There's no in-betweens on it. I loved it. I wound up, when I went out, it's usually your own boss on a one-man crane, or you have another guy with you every once in a while on a two-man crane. You go in, your objective in crane rental is to get in and out, make money for the company. You get in and out safely. Everybody goes home, and you have a great day. And it's traveling, a lot of time away from the home. It's not for everybody, because when I say it's a lot of time away from home, you pack a bag. I used to have a bag packed in my crane and in my truck because I didn't know if I was coming home that day. I could get back to the yard and say, or be on my way home and be called back to the yard and go work all night and not come home for 2 or 3 days or weeks on end. Missed a lot on my kids. It takes a lot on the family, and it's pretty hard and strenuous against yourself in a relationship. But it's to me, again, I loved it.
It's the coolest industry in
It
the
is.
world. I'm very biased
It
to
is.
it. It's the traveling roadshow circus.
Mm-hmm.
You drive, you go, you set up, you do, you leave, and you just keep doing that.
You get to do the different things that going onto a regular construction job site. you're there every day, same guys. Yeah, it's a lot of waiting. But in crane rental, you get to do different
The
things.
big thing every day.
Yeah, I mean,
I used to love to move cranes. I didn't want to be on the same job site doing a steel erection project for 30 or 40 or 50, 60 days, whatever, whatever the hang was. Right? That wasn't me. I wanted to constantly be moving cranes. And a lot of my stories will revert back to PCR because that's where I grew up. But I used to beg Art, I'm tired. Can you put me on a steel job? And he'd go, the last time I did that, you wanted off of it in 3 days. But please, this time will be different. And he would give me a short, like 18 or 20-day job. And I would have to just bite my lip because 4 days in, I'd be like, I got to get out of here. I got to get out of here. Steel erection is super fun because you have to make 100 picks a day. You have to keep up with the iron workers, or the iron workers have no qualms about telling you to go home. They'll just switch you out. But I loved to move cranes, and it was the traveling circus. It really was. We were down in San Diego putting a couple of crawlers together on the courthouse down there, and there wasn't enough room on the job. We had to put the boom together in the air. And at lunchtime, we probably had 150 people on the street watching us.
Yeah.
And I loved it. I loved every second of it. It was so much fun. Oh, it was super cool, and just putting together a rig in the air.
Yeah.
It was, thank God for iron workers. I didn't like climbing that boom to do it, but they helped a lot. So it was really fun, and but Tom's right. I mean, you're somewhere different every day. We moved a killer whale.
Wow. You might have to talk a little bit about that.
I wasn't on the job. I didn't get to do that one. But yeah, they picked up Shamu. Marine World moved from Redwood City to Vallejo. Those whales had to move somehow.
And the cranes.
Crane rental.
Gently, of course.
Yeah, crane rental. They made big slings for them and everything.
and it like what you're saying, it's the neat stuff that you get to do. And you get to do the everyday HVAC up and down, one up, one down here and there. And like Jimmy's talking here with that, I mean, in 2004, my brother-in-law, Jason Best, and we got to go up to Forest Hill and shot a movie with Kevin Costner. We were up there for a week doing, the movie's called Dragonfly.
Movie work was super fun because you got fed.
Now, when was this?
This was in 2004, I believe, 2003, 2004. But we were up on the American River and had a 70-ton crane up there, worked for Bragg. Almost flipped the crane. It was...
Well, people love to look at cranes as they're driving. I don't know what it is. Tom, as the representative in charge of cranes, do you handle the crane operators who work for, say, Kiewit, and then also the crane rental, or are you mainly crane rental?
I'm mainly crane rental, but I assist with the other reps around Northern California on any issues that have come up with cranes on construction sites.
Okay. And speaking of crane rental, Local 3, more specifically and most recently, Dave Harrison, and then in the past, business manager Dan Redding, and you two have both been heavily involved in negotiating very good agreements for crane rental, the last one being the best one they've ever had. Can you explain that process and how the members can be on the negotiating team and how that kind of came out, that you got the best agreement ever last year?
Ultimately, it starts out with the pre-negotiation meetings with the membership and seeing what they want, what their main needs are, what their main concerns are, and what they will, be happy with. So it's all about the membership of them bringing it to us, and then we take it to the table. To get on to be a rank and file in there with us, to sit inside and go up against, or not against, but talking and negotiating with the employers is, again, they're elected and voted on by the membership. We don't appoint any of them. So they've got to, if they wanted to be on there, during our pre-negotiation meetings, they would say, hey, I'd like to come on to the committee and put names down, and then it's a vote by the membership.
How many members are in crane rental on
The
average?
last 2 times we've had 4 each time. How many members are in crane rental?
Total, yeah.
685.
How many crane operators do you think we have total in Local 3?
We're 1,000.
Okay. It's a pretty sought after position because, right, they make a really good wage. So can you say on average in a year, say they're working an average number of hours, how much a crane operator can make?
Oh, 200K.
That's insane. Now you said 200K and that's just average. What if you're like really hauling ass and just working overtime and hours and everything?
Oh, there's guys out there that are doing 3,500-hour years.
Yep.
They're making a lot of money. It's a 40-hour week. It's double time after 8. It's time and a half after 8. It's
I should
double
have been a
time
crane
after 10.
operator, man.
Yeah. It is. There's a lot of sacrifices, but it's a high dollar world.
Right.
So obviously people who are listening, they're like, I want that. I mean, right? You get to be outside. You get to kind of be, people are really interested in cranes. I mean, you're kind of, like I said, the big dog on the job site, which is not to say that all of our heavy equipment operators are not equally important, but the crane comes in and does the thing that everyone is waiting on, right? So if you're wanting to get in and become a crane operator, you'd say, okay, well, we have a great training program, the Operating Engineers Local 3 Journeyman and Apprenticeship Training Center. But what do these young people or people looking for a career change need to know before they get into it? Because not everybody could be a crane operator. Like, I know I could not be a crane operator.
I will tell you, Mandy, if you are becoming a crane operator because of a paycheck, you're not going to make it.
Right.
You have to want and love what you're doing. The paycheck is a bonus, but if you don't love running cranes or being an oiler on cranes, then you'll never make it in the industry. You got to want it, and it's not any different. If you love dozers and you want to run dozers, you're not running them for the paycheck. The paycheck is the bonus. You're running them because you love to.
That's a good point in
I
life.
agree.
But yeah, it doesn't sound like easy work.
It's not.
I know you guys are not tower crane operators, but that also is fairly interesting. Being a tower crane operator, I only say that because in my little experience with it, I remember in Honolulu climbing up a tower crane ladder, and it was windy, and so they weren't going to run the crane. And I have my camera, and I literally thought I was climbing for like an hour, and like my camera is hitting that little, the little ladder, and then there's like the little pad, and then you go back around again, and I climb up, and it's like a hatch, and then I pop up, and I realize that like this guy does that 2 times a day, every day, and he never leaves that little cab. I mean, he goes to the bathroom up there, he eats up there. He has really no human contact, and everything is told to him through his radio. I mean, that takes a special breed of person
It does.
to be able to do that.
It
and,
does.
And I mean, the views are amazing. We get our best sort of social media photos from the tower crane operators.
We have some phenomenal crane operators in Local 3 and some phenomenal tower crane operators in Local 3. I actually got certified to run towers. Full disclosure, I'm scared of heights.
Wow. Yeah.
So,
That makes 2.
yeah,
I mean, I've done that climb on several tower cranes, and the agents won't even come with me.
I didn't do
You're
well.
like, how much longer is it?
I have 40 hours in a tower crane, and I was as nervous about being up there on the first hour as I was the 39th hour. I covered for a guy
sounds
that was
awful.
on vacation,
Yeah.
and I never did it again. And I thank God every day that there's people that want to run them things.
Well, the isolation alone, I mean, you might go a little bit crazy. You really don't see anyone. But it's AC. They've got like their little world up there. It's like an office, but
Just like we talked about, the large hydros are awesome machines, and these European machines they're amazing technology. Tower cranes are amazing. They really are. The technology is
Yes.
crazy in those things. But yeah, it's a lonely world up there. Not for me.
speaking of tower cranes, maybe one of the foremost accidents that happened with the tower crane in San Francisco, and I believe it was in 1989, a tower crane tipped in the financial district and 5 people were killed. And that was one of the beginning incidents that created a lot of the crane certifications and the OSHA regulations as it relates to cranes. And Local 3 lobbied very aggressively to make that all happen. Can you talk, Jimmy, a little bit about where you were at when that happened and sort of how that spearheaded the safety movement for the crane?
When that tower crane fell in San Francisco, and I just found out today during this podcast that Tom was off serving our country in the United States Army when that happened. But Sheedy picked up all the parts and pieces and cleaned up the mess that left. But what that did do was I always tell guys, don't make the paper. It's one of my big things. Don't make the newspaper. Don't make headlines. We don't want to be on the news. It's never a good day when you make the newspaper. It's just not. You don't want to be there. And quite a few of us in crane rental have made the newspaper, and that's a bummer. But when that tower crane fell, the world saw a picture of a working jib on top of a school bus and smashed cars on the street in San Francisco. A handful of iron workers lost their lives that day. The operator, I believe, lost his life that day. It was a bad deal.
Yeah, it was like a 16-story building. There's a term for that, the crane was being jumped.
Yeah, they were jumping
Yeah.
it.
And so whatever, it was obviously a very traumatic disaster.
It was a disaster, and it exposed to the United States, as well as the world, if you want to go there, the fact that there was no standard for crane operators. Not that it was the crane operator's fault. I'm not saying that. You came to work for me. I taught you how to run a crane, and I put you in the seat of it.
Bye.
Yeah, there was every state in the nation has a driver's license. That driver's license sets the floor, if you will. You possess the minimum qualifications to operate a motor vehicle. The NCCCO, the National Certification for Crane Operators, was born out of that accident. And I hate to say that they set the minimum standards, but they're a certification, and that's kind of what it's for. It's to test you and your knowledge of the crane industry and cranes, and to say, okay, Mandy, you've got this. You possess enough knowledge to go to work for a crane company as an operator. It's up to the crane company to take you to the level of they're going to put you in a machine and leave you in it, but at least they know that you possess the minimum qualifications to go to work for them.
And Local 3 is really lobbied for that.
Local 3 was heavily involved in that, along with Bragg Crane and several other people. Granite Construction was involved in it. And now I'm involved in it. Not many people know this. I'll confess it on the air today. I'm a commissioner on the National Commission for the Certification of Crane Operators. Russ Burns got me involved in it 7 years ago. And it's one of the cooler things I've been allowed to do since being on staff of this local. I really enjoy it.
Now that, to become certified, you have to pass a test, correct?
Correct.
And how do you get trained for that test? Is that something the OE3JATC offers?
Absolutely.
So, and do you have to like reinstate or retake, or does that stick with you for your life, or do you have to go back and retake?
Every 5 years, you have to recertify a written exam.
And what is that, like weights, and is it more of a math thing?
There is load chart questions, there's general knowledge questions, wire rope questions, load bearing ground condition questions, there's a different test set up for different types of cranes. There's hydraulic cranes, the lattice boom truck cranes that we talked about earlier, crawler cranes. Tom is a practical examiner. He's certified to administer practical exams. So if Mandy were getting her crane license today, she would pass a written exam, and then she would have to go out in the field and pass a practical exam and actually demonstrate that you can make a crane run. So Tom is a licensed practical examiner. There's several instructors out at the ranch that are licensed practical examiners. I'm one as well. I call myself the bench warmer because Tom and a bunch of other guys go out before I do, but I try to get 2 or 3 practicals in a year.
And sitting on the board that you said, are you in charge of what's on the test, or what are the
Yes.
types? Okay, which changes, right?
The tests change with the world as cranes change. A group of individuals have to get together and write questions for the test. It's one of the hardest things about being involved in the CCO is question writing. Yeah. Because you write all these questions and you're in a room with some of the most respected crane minds in the world, engineers that design them. Yeah. People from all over the United States. There's I think there's 16 people involved from different locals. And then industry as a whole. So you write this question and then they put it up on the wall and all of your peers read the question and they're like, well, that's stupid. And you're crushed because your question wasn't valid.
Well, it's a lot of power though for your
there's-
question to
yeah.
make the whole thing. They're
Oh,
like,
but
yeah,
there's-
that's a good
The
one.
pressure's insane to write. We just finished a whole bunch of question writing in 21. And we're actually getting back to live meetings, thank goodness.
Thank
I hate
goodness.
Zoom. It's been a great tool. It's got us through the pandemic, but yeah, we're moving forward.
Well, we can't talk about cranes without talking about Oilers, right?
Okay.
So what's this thing Oiler? What does the
I
Oiler
feel like I
do?
need to slide away. Tom, come on.
Have
say
any of you
something.
ever been an Oiler? Are you an Oiler?
I've been an Oiler. I know
Okay.
Jimmy has too. Both of us have.
8 years of your life is spent oiling.
Right.
It's a 4-year apprenticeship and then
So
4
that
more
is
years.
that is what happens. Do all
Yeah.
Oilers want to be crane operators, or do some just stay Oilers?
Not necessarily. No,
Okay.
We've got a member that's he's got 35 years in as an
As-
assistant engineer.
Okay.
You mentioned Gary Heel.
Yep, and Gary Hill also.
We'd fight over having Gary Hill oil for us.
Dave-
He's one of the best
a
in
good
the
one.
business.
Dave Colburn with Biggie. He's a third generation.
There's a husband and wife team, I think, for Biggie too, maybe.
The Youngermans.
Youngermans.
Garth and Terry
Yeah.
Youngerman.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's a lifetime Oiler for him, only him.
That's the second set of eyes for that operator. That's the safety on a larger crane. He's the one that's gonna be checking the load bearing on a critical lift or making sure nobody's in the tail swing.
Is an Oiler always dispatched with a crane operator? That's part of the agreement.
Well, in crane rental, they'd go out as a team.
Okay.
So Tom and I'd be a team. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're not a card carrying operator, but in the crane rental world, they'd send Tom and I out on a rig, and we'd fight over who was going to be the oiler that day.
Right.
And
Nobody wants to be the Oiler.
no, actually, nobody wants to be the operator
Oh,
Right.
okay.
because it's a lot of fun to run the ground.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to me. It's like the yin and the yang.
Yeah.
Ultimately, the oiler has a lot of responsibility, and like Jimmy said, it's a team. It's a team effort. You know, and in the larger cranes where you can't see things behind you, that's that second set of eyes that's going to help you and keep you out of trouble.
You guys are both on staff now. You're obviously very passionate about the crane world, but also the union. What's the best part of what you do in your job? And that's
The
the
best part?
big question. Why do you do this?
I like the union. I like what it stands for. I like the guys that I work with. I think the best part about it is what I do, and even when I was in the field, I wound up having a lot of, and Jimmy knows this right off the bat, that I had a bad reputation when it came to with the guys out there. When I come into their barn, it's, oh crap, Tom's here, or hey Tom, great to see you. And I was known as I can't say this.
Yeah, you can like a shit stir.
There you go. There you go. And now, you know, I'm doing the same thing now.
You're just on the other side.
Right. And you know, the best part about it is this is a very thankless job.
Oh, is it ever?
Very thankless job. But when you get that one thank you, it's good.
It
And
is.
it's not what, I don't strive on that thankful, because ultimately if a guy calls me up, he may not like the answer he gets, but he's gonna get the answer that's right by that agreement and right by the union, and that we're going to do this the right way, that I can defend you. You know, and again, sometimes they don't like the answer they get, but when you go to bat for them and that one out of 100 or one out of 1,000 thank yous are good.
You are helping people. You're
Oh, yes.
defending them.
Yes.
You're making sure the agreement is honored.
Making sure the employers are abiding by that.
Yeah.
Remember, it's an agreement.
Yeah.
It's not I'm not entitled. It's an agreement. And
Yeah,
I try
so
to
meaning
teach it.
you have agreed to do this.
Both
Both
have
sides.
agreed to it.
Yeah.
Both
Good word,
sides have agreed to
agreement.
This giant. I can't swear on this.
Oh,
This
you can.
giant-
I just did.
Did you?
Yeah.
Oh, this giant ball of twine that we have called a union. It is so multifaceted, and it's so delicate. Tom and I are killing ourselves trying to keep the union the union. Everybody on staff is trying to keep the union the union. We have to negotiate agreements without walking off a cliff and making ourselves overpriced and allowing the non-union to move in and take our jobs. We have to raise the most professional operators we possibly can to be better than the non-union so they can't walk in and take our jobs. Because we are more expensive, so we have to be better.
You have to be worth that value.
We have to be. And it's a partnership, like Tom said. The owners, and it doesn't matter if you're a crane rental or if you're an AGC general contractor, we have to work together, we have to partner, and we have to do the best we can possibly do to keep the union the union. And when you hit a home run, like Tom said, when you hit a home run and you place Mandy with an employer, and the employer is just so tickled to death because he got Mandy, and it's a home run, that makes it all worth it. Because every business rep out there will tell you it's like a free punch to the jaw. Everybody takes shots at you. You're never good enough. There's always a political problem.
You get the problems.
There's
You
an
get all
issue
the
problem.
problems.
You get them all. And it's a balancing act. It really is. But when you hit that home run and you mate that employer with that employee and everybody's happy, it makes it all worthwhile. Or like what Tom did the other day. He got a guy out of a non-union crane and turned him onto a union crane. And his wife was in tears in the hall when he was signing up.
Oh.
That makes all those kicks to the jaw worth it right there. I just wish we could figure out how to make our membership more engaged. The crane rental guys really are. Tom said there's over 600 of them. We get 250 at a ratification meeting. It's a phenomenal percentage.
That is.
But it's not good enough. 250 out of 600? Where's the rest of those guys?
Right.
Where are they? You know what that tells everybody? They don't care. And that's
They just get the paycheck.
yeah, and they care as soon as there's an issue.
Yeah.
But involvement is a huge deal.
Well, that's human
The crane
nature.
guys are really involved, which is great.
Well, part of our reasoning for doing these podcasts is to sort of articulate what exactly it is that you guys do. On the phone all the time, you're working on agreements, there's the Chevron maintenance turnaround. I mean, you're a district rep in charge of a staff and a district. There's the meetings we have or the meetings we don't have. There's been COVID. There's been a lot's gone on in the last few years. Do you ever just miss operating a crane?
Yes.
Every day.
Every single day.
And why is that? Because you're like, it's just quiet?
Honest, there's been plenty of times I wanted to sit, get up in that crane and run it. We did a job fair late last year. I think it was in October at Contra Costa, and JTC was out there, Sabrina, and we got bragged to bring out one of their I think it was 90 ton, and the operator set it up, and I'm just watching him. I helped him set it up. Then he's like, I know you want to get in there. Go ahead. So I got up and I wanted to play. So I got up there and played. So, but yeah, I miss it. I miss it. But either side, I like what I do.
There's a crane out there that wasn't out there when I came on staff. And it's a LeBaire 1300. I was fortunate enough to grow up running luffing jibs because Peninsula Crane bought into the luffing jib world at a very early stage. The LR 1300, I think, is probably one of the coolest cranes ever made. They just look good sitting there, and they're absolute hot rods. So I would love the opportunity to go out and run one on a steel erection job. I think it would be so much fun. But I'd probably be on it for 3 days and then say, get me out of here.
Yeah.
So, Jimmy, talk a little bit about, how the certification process has changed.
The then and now, and I shouldn't say that we used to have a lot of fun on job sites because I think everybody still does have fun on job sites, but it's different. We used to figure out how to make picks. We didn't have enough crane, but we had to get a job done. And a lot of really smart guys, a lot of great operators that I was fortunate enough to grow up with would put load charts together, look at different configurations. I can think of a job one time out at Cottle Road where we added front lumps to a crane and used a different load chart for a different configuration to make an air handler pick. It was, in our minds, perfectly safe. And the people that figured it out, I do believe today it was perfectly safe. But in today's world, it's unacceptable. San Jose Crane had a rig called Big Mo. That thing was legendary. They built it themselves. It was made out of different cranes. And the operators kept a notebook. And they would make picks with it with, let's say, 150 feet of boom. They made a pick at 80 feet. They'd write it down. So the next time they needed to make a pick at 80 feet, they'd go, well, we did it once and it was good for this much and it did it pretty well, so we can do it again.
Big Mo.
Big Mo. Big Mo was a cool rig. Unfortunately, she fell to her death, but she was a good girl.
You can't do that today. And just be like, oh, well, we did it once. Now we know we can do it again. I mean, there's actually like requirements based on what the equipment can do, nor can you piece it.
You can't. Yeah, you can't.
Not like Legos.
Totally against the rules now. And it's a good thing. We used to, on a steel erection job, hanging iron as it's called in the trades, you would bring your phone man and your connectors to the ground. It was your job to get them to the catering truck. So if you were on the 10th floor of a building, those guys would jump on the ball and you'd land them at the catering truck to make sure.
I've heard stories like that.
Oh, it was a ball. We used to have fun.
You're like, all right, I'm dropping you down.
Yeah. Today, with a license in your pocket, and there's a lot of guys out there that'll tell you a CCO card is a liability. It's not. It's not a liability, but it is a certification that says you know better. So when your favorite salesman at the company you're working for misses on a measurement or something comes in a little bit heavy, these guys are professional and they want to make the job go and they want to get the job done. So there's keys in these machines. You can shut the computer system off and you can override them and you can lie to them and you can still make the pick. But in today's world, you can't do that anymore. And I stress that a lot to the guys. Don't turn that key. Don't make that decision. Get another crane, reconfigure, add counterweight. Do not make that decision. And it's kind of a bummer because
It sucks.
It takes the O out of operator. It was something that I loved doing, it's just, hey, we're gonna figure out how to make this crane do this job. And you can't do it anymore. And if you do it, and God forbid something goes wrong, you can lose your license. The CCOs they consider themselves the gold standard of crane certification. They have an integrity team. If a crane accident makes a headline and they see it, they might be calling that operator to ask him what happened. And if they find out that a key's been turned and a crane was overrode and it was negligence on the operator's part, they have a team of people that will look at that, interview that operator, and they may make a decision to revoke his license. It's a big deal, and you don't want it. No job's worth that. You make a living running that crane. The first and foremost is you don't want to kill somebody. You don't want to hurt anybody. You don't want to have an accident. You don't want to make headlines, as I talked about earlier. But you need to make a living and feed your family. You need that license in your pocket.
So what you're saying is basically it may have been a lot more fun back in the day, but these requirements are necessary to save people's lives. And you're saying regardless of your need to finish the pick or the job.
And you can't make a decision to turn a key. That's not your decision to make. When you became a crane operator and got certified, you agreed not to do that.
Now, are there non-union crane operators out there that don't have a license?
I'm sure there are, but the state of California requires that you carry a certification. It doesn't have to be a CCO. There are other certification bodies out there. One of them is the OECP. It's an operating engineers program. CCO is the major dominant in the license world, but there are others, but they are revocable and you could lose it.
Now, California probably has the strictest licensing.
Every state in the nation is required to have a licensed crane operator because of the new OSHA regulations that came into effect. California is actually not the strictest. The Hawaiian Islands are pretty strict. Angie, one of our female tower crane operators, she's part of the board out there. Hayash it's called. And on the other end of the spectrum, New York, the 5 boroughs. I could not go to New York and be a crane operator. I'd have to be an oiler. I'd have to spend some time in New York before they'd allow me to get a New York City crane license. Interesting. And you don't want to lose them.
I mean, it's a necessary kind of burden, is what you're saying.
It is.
Do you remember Scooter Gentry?
I remember Scooter well.
Scooter used to tell us some stories about how he would ask women out on the top of sky rises in San Francisco with a clipboard in his tower crane, who were women were sunbathing.
No, it still goes on. It still goes on, and there are stories. I've seen it happen a couple of times where you're on a job and somebody will put a sign in the window saying, "This is my phone number, crane operator, call me."
That's crazy.
It is. It's funny. It actually happened to me one time at the San Francisco airport. One of I don't remember which airline it was, but I was asked for my phone number, and my oiler was furious because my oiler was younger and not married, and I am. And he was like, "How come the married guy gets asked for his phone number?" And I'm like, I probably because I'm in the seat, dude. Yeah, I don't know. It was kind of a funny experience.
Well, I know that the members appreciate both of you. I know that Local 3 appreciates you. I appreciate that you came in and talked a little bit about this, because it is a very interesting and unique world that people are interested in, but they really have no clue. Like people who are not part of Local 3 or the crane world. It's fascinating. Do you have any parting words?
I'm just going to say this, is that I think the membership should, like Jimmy said, get involved, ask questions, utilize our training center that we have in both, here at Local 3 and the one in Crosby, Texas. Utilize the assets that are there for you. And it helps make you a better operator, more professional. And that's,
Get educated, right? Get educated on your contract, understand all the resources available to you. I mean, the union doesn't just exist without no input or work from you, the member. And you guys are working your asses off all the time, all day long, every day.
It's something that I try to tell everybody at every union meeting, which because of the pandemic we haven't had a lot of, is put your arm around your apprentice. That's the future. And we have some great apprentices, although the old gray-haired guys like myself will tell you that none of them are worth beans, but they are. There's some great kids coming up there. There's kids that are ready to leave footprints on all of our backs.
Because that's where the future is.
It is, but breaking into the crane world is extremely tough. Like I said earlier, it's an 8-year process. You'll spend 4 years as an apprentice. The people at Rancho Marietta will tell you they don't grow oilers, they grow operators, but that's not true in the crane world. They grow oilers. Because about the time you're a 5th step apprentice, you're probably starting to become a pretty good oiler. And you're going to spend some time oiling, and that's where you're going to learn.